so we're going to call the public hearing to order. I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Moved.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded. Okay, the public hearing agenda is approved. We'll start with the staff presentation. I'll hand things over to our CAO, Terry Doyle.
I'll hand things over to our CFO, who will do a presentation on the bylaw respecting commercial development district.
Thank you, Terry, through your worship.
Sure.
So this is in consideration of potentially going to second reading later on at a special public meeting. So this is a bylaw that council requested us to look into a number of months ago. And this is the results of discussions at council, at our planning advisory committee, and a few council meetings where we reviewed this bylaw or potential bylaw. So it is a bylaw around commercial development district and a support program relating to that. The authority for this bylaw comes from Section 71 of the Municipal Government Act. It was enacted in legislature back in 2016, late 2016, maybe early 2017. And it gives municipalities the ability to phase in assessments for particular developments in particular areas. The intention or the rationale of this legislative change was to support economic growth, to support development of brownfield sites, and to support commercial property owners in areas of upward assessment pressures. We haven't had significant upward assessment pressures, so town council asked to look at this really around economic growth in the town of Knoxbury, in particular an area that we'll look at as we continue in the slides. So some of the conversations and considerations that we went through when reviewing this at the varying levels were what the development district, what area that would be, whether that was going to be a larger area, a more refined area. So that was, consideration and discussion, and it actually changed partway through the process. And we also looked at when properties would be eligible, and did we want to incentivize any new development, or do we want there to be a certain level of development? We'll get into the results of our considerations, but some of the considerations we had throughout the process. We also, the legislation gives you the ability to provide a rebate up to a maximum of 10 years and up to a maximum of 50% of the taxes over that time period. And so council was able to consider varying levels of that. You don't have to go the full 10 years or the full 50%. You can do anything as long as it comes in under those thresholds. So that was part of the discussions that were held with council throughout the period of reviewing this. The results of this, which resulted in a bylaw that was put forward at the December 19th meeting, I believe was first reading, was a commercial development district support program bylaw, where based on the building permit process or through the building permit process, the investment would be at least $250,000, and council wanted there to be a bit of a more sizable investment in order to be eligible to fall under this bylaw. Council decided that the phase-in period, they wanted to use the maximum, the 10-year phase-in period, and the maximum percentage of rebate. So you can see there the rebate calculation for eligible properties would be 90% of property taxes in the first year, down to 10% in the 10th year. The total annual rebates that will be provided are not going to be more than 50%. So the rebate limit is up to 50% of the entire taxes over that 10-year period, and that is what is in our bylaw, is up to 50%. The duration of your eligibility within the program. You are able to enter the program once PBSC has assessed the development in its entirety. So once the full assessment of the development is included Sween Street to Macquarie Drive to Reynolds up to Reeve. So it's that block of properties kind of surrounding the Civic Center and the provincial building is the area that was determined would make most sense, or council felt was the area that they wanted to see development in, and an area that we've been trying to develop over the last few years. So the intention is that hopefully with this development support program bylaw, we hopefully will see some development in this area, and we do own land in this area. So, and just one other item on the bylaw. Those are the highlights, but any eligible property owner is required to enter into an agreement with the municipality when they're accepted in this program, or it's determined that their development meets the criteria. There is a legal agreement that is entered into between the property owner and the municipality, and that is part of the bylaw. It's an appendix within the bylaw. So that is all for the presentation. And the motion for consideration that would be moving forward to the public meeting, special public meeting later on, would be that the town of Hawkesbury gives second and final reading to approve the commercial development district support program bylaw.
Thank you, Erin. Terry, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll move forward to council question period. Any questions or comments for Erin or Terry? Oh, this is just for council at this moment. Okay, so no hearing, no questions or comments. We'll move on to gallery presentations. So we'll start by a call for any opposing presentations. Okay, so I have to do that 2 more times. Any other calls for opposing presentations? Any calls for opposing presentations? Okay, at this time I will call for any presentations in favor. Okay. Any presentations in favor this evening? And a final call for presentations in favor. Okay. Hearing none, I would call on our CAO to inquire about any written submissions.
There were no written submissions received, Your Worship.
Thank you. All right, so we will now move on to a staff presentation from Eastern District Planning Commission.
Hello everyone, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Michaela Tate and I'm a planner with the Eastern District Planning Commission. I will be presenting this file. So this file is primarily about the commercial development district, as well as the required accompanying amendments to the municipal planning strategy. We'll also, in addition to it, we are looking at the redesignation and rezoning of PIDs 501574886, 501-55985, and 501-55795. As a housekeeping amendment, we've also added that we're clarifying mixed uses in the commercial Main Street zone or the C5 zone. Just a text amendment saying that we are permitting mixed uses. So just a quick recap, the purpose of the establishment of the Commercial Development District is a requirement of the Municipal Government Act in order to enable this commercial assessment phasing tool. So the proposed municipal planning strategy amendments. So a commercial assessment phasing tool can be enabled under Section 71C, which is what Erin had already stated. Further to that section, 71C3 outlines that we are required to have a commercial development district established in our municipal planning strategy in order to enable that bylaw. And also in accordance with 71C4, that commercial development district must be in an area serviced by municipal water and sewer. So pretty much the proposed amendments will satisfy the requirements of the municipal planning strategy. And the amendments include adding a comprehensive development district section in the Port Hawkesbury municipal planning strategy, as well as implementing the CDD or commercial development district zone as an overlay. So this is, again, is just the overlay map, which you've already seen before. So on to the redesignation and rezoning of those three property IDs. So they're all currently zoned as open space under the open space designation of the Port Hawkesbury generalized future land use map. So the old Port Hawkesbury Arena is situated on two of those properties, and the third property that we're looking at rezoning is currently vacant. The redesignation is pretty much intended to increase the development potential of these properties and maybe have them turn into something a bit more of benefit to the town and the community. So this is just some designation maps that we're looking at. This map is indicating that the designations are currently open space, but we're looking to redesignate them into downtown designation. So this would be included in the amending pages. This one is the same thing, but it's for the zoning. It's in the open space zone, and we're going to be rezoning that into the commercial Main Street zone or the C5 zone. And then the last is part of this file is clarifying mixed uses in the commercial Main Street zone. So basically, in the municipal planning strategy policy, the intent was always to permit mixed uses. So apartments or dwellings above commercial or in the same building as a commercial use. However, in the land use bylaw, it doesn't specify that. So even though it's in the municipal planning strategy, we wouldn't be able to issue a permit for a mixed use building. So this is kind of to just more of a housekeeping amendment in line with, you know, the goal of focusing on commercial development. So this would be the possible council motion. It's very long and it is in your packages. And that's everything.
Thank you. So we'll open up the floor for questions from council or comments.
Just shows.
Oh, I
Go
think Councillor Quinn was first.
Yes,
and
that's
then we'll
fine.
over to you.
Through you to Terry, have we had legal advice on the old arena? Can we change that to the C5 from open?
Yep, through your worship. So we can certainly change that, the zoning. Prior to sale of the property for development, we will go through a more extensive review with respect to the any conditions on the existing roof.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're good? Okay, over to you, Councillor Dugan.
No, that was my question also, Your Worship, thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments from council at this time? Okay, so hearing none, I will call for any opposing presentations from the gallery. Okay, for a second time, I will call for any opposing presentations. And for a third and final time, I will call for any opposing presentations. So hearing none, I will now call for presentations in favor. For a second time, I will call for presentations in favor. And a third and final time, a call for presentations in favor. Okay. Hearing none, I will ask our CAO if we have any written submissions at this time.
There were no written submissions received, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Terry. We'll move on to agenda item 10, which is a staff presentation from Eastern District Planning Commission once again.
Okay, so let's see. There's some unfamiliar faces, so those who I haven't met yet, my name is Kristen. Just a pleasure to be here.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Okay, so today we are talking about a couple of properties in the Prince Street area. And the reason that this application comes up, this item was brought forward by the Planning Advisory Committee at their November 16th meeting, where staff were directed to investigate potential rezoning of a town-owned property, PID 50113745, to the residential 2-unit or R2 zone. And the purpose of that was to enable potential housing development or affordable housing proposals on the property in the future. So the property itself, these maps are in your agenda package as well as appendices A and B. As I mentioned, the property in question is owned by the town, so it's this large property here in the kind of pale green color. It is a sizable portion of the lot we're looking at. Again, it's kind of hard to see, but it's the hatched portion of that property that we're looking at. So the property itself is outlined in teal, but the hatched portion is what we're looking at potentially rezoning. So it's about 5,500 square meters, that site. So it is sizable. And the remaining portion of that property would not be subject to this rezoning. So the green space there, that is the O1 open space recreational zone. And the remaining zoning that you're mostly seeing there, the yellow is the residential 2-unit R2 zone. So if you're unfamiliar, I just wanted to put the aerial photography in here. So the star marks the subject site, and then towards the water, just to the north, the other portion of the property, that is the playground and field near the strait. In terms of the surrounding area, well, the site itself is pretty densely treed right now and slopes off back towards Rue Street. A portion of it is cleared and is a grassed area right now. But the remaining surrounding area is predominantly low density residential development, and directly abutting the property is the Shalom House owned by the Rock Society. So let's give you an idea of where the property is. So as I mentioned, the current zoning of the hatched portion that we're looking at is zoned O1. And so that zone allows parks, trails, and other recreational type developments, but would not allow residential development. And so if council wishes to enable residential uses in the future, it needs to be rezoned. So the zone we're looking at is the R2 zone, which would permit single detached dwellings or 2-unit dwellings as of right, or 3 to 5-unit dwellings by site plan approval. So that would not be through a council approval process. It's handled by district planning, but it's a somewhat different application than a typical permit application. So now what you're looking at, this is the generalized future land use map for the area. So this map is tied to the zoning map, but it's a little bit different. So this shows in broad strokes the intention for lands in the future. So you can see the green here is designated for open space uses, and the yellow area is residential. And so the property that we're looking at is designated open space and zoned open space. And you may notice that the abutting properties where Shalom House is at, that's split zone or split designated right now. So a portion of it's open space and a portion is residential. And then the other property that's identified there, that's also a town-owned property. So those are designated open space, but zoned residential right now, which typically doesn't make sense. But what happened there was in 2009, there was a rezoning application to enable the Shalom House development, I believe. And we have a policy that allows us to consider rezoning without a matching designation, provided that it's immediately abutting the designation where the use would be permitted. So where those two properties abut the residential designation, we could just rezone them. But in this case, you can see that the property we're looking at does not abut the residential designation. So it has to be redesignated in order to be rezoned. And staff is of the opinion that while we're doing this, we should really be updating the designation on Shalom House and the other town property for consistency with the zoning. So where we are looking at redesignating a property, there's two things that we need to worry about. So first is whether the redesignation is consistent with the intent of the planning strategy. And so we have policy L4-2 to look at, which states that council intends to acquire and develop the lands encircling Grants Pond and Long Pond for nature trails, picnic areas, and woodland park. But in this case, the subject site that we're looking at is not actually encircling the pond, and these lands may better serve the town as an opportunity to build additional housing. And so staff feels that redesignation is in keeping with the intent of the strategy. The next thing that we need to concern ourselves with is whether the redesignation is in keeping with the statements of provincial interest. So there's 5 policy areas, and I'll just go through these really quickly. Drinking water, this isn't in a public supply watershed. It's not in a flood risk area, and it's not agricultural lands. So those first 3 don't really apply. In terms of infrastructure, we're talking about whether we're making efficient use of municipal infrastructure. And in this case, we would be infilling where there are services already available. So that is in compliance. And then in terms of housing, of course, we're enabling further housing development and potentially affordable housing. And so staff's opinion is that these statements are met. So back to the rezoning just really quickly. As I mentioned, I think zoning needs to be consistent with the designation in a given area. So if we're redesignating, we need to rezone. And staff's recommendation would be to look to the R2 zone, which is consistent with the surrounding area. In this case, we would typically, in a rezoning, look at a series of criteria that need to be met. But in this case, it's a concurrent MPS planning strategy and land use bylaw amendment. So they're not subject to an appeal, and we won't be looking at those criteria. So in conclusion, the redesignation and rezoning of the subject site would enable construction of new housing units. And just to ensure consistency between the designation and zoning, we're looking at redesignating the identified properties in Appendix A. And staff are recommending to redesignate and rezone as outlined in the appendices, the maps that we've been looking at. So this did go before the Planning Advisory Committee on December 13th. At that meeting, the Planning Advisory Committee made a motion to recommend that council approve as staff have recommended. And this is a public hearing, so we have advertised this evening's hearing in the January 3rd and January 10th editions of the Reporter in accordance with Municipal Government Act requirements. And we also mailed notice directly to the Rock Society where their property would be redesignated. So that's it. I also have a motion available for council, but I believe it'll be available later as well.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. At this time, we'll now open up the floor for any questions or comments from council. Doesn't appear that there are any questions at this time. Thank you for your presentation. Now I will ask from the gallery if there are any opposing presentations at this time. We'll call a second time for opposing presentations. I'll call 1/3 and final time for opposing presentations. Okay, hearing none, we will call for presentations in favor for the gallery, either online or in person. I will call for any presentations in favor. And for a final 3rd time, I will call for any presentations in favor. Hearing none, I will ask our CAO if we received any written submissions at this time.
There were no written submissions received with respect to this change in bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry. We'll move on to agenda item 14, which is another staff presentation from Eastern District Planning Commission.
So this file is regarding the redesignation of PID 50174382 along McLeod Avenue in Port Hawkesbury. So the town of Port Hawkesbury is seeking to redesignate that property from the open space designation to the downtown designation. And once again, concurrently rezone the property from open space 01 to commercial Main Street C5. And we're also looking at rezoning a portion of PID 50, oh gosh, several PIDs, from the open space designation to the residential designation for a similar reason to Kristen's presentation, which we'll look at in a bit. So this property, the subject property that we're looking at along McLeod Avenue, is a town-owned property. For the most part, it's vacant, cleared with some planted trees, as well as the active transportation corridor that runs through it, a bench and a paved pathway. I think it's paved. Yeah. So that's what the property looks like right now. Right now, the property, like previously mentioned, is currently zoned open space, and we're looking to rezone it to the downtown, the commercial Main Street C5 zone, just because that will give the property more opportunities. Like Kristen had previously stated, the open space designation only allows trails and recreation. It's not really a space for larger developments like commercial or housing. So there was a former playground that did exist. This is a picture from Google Street View in 2012. That playground and swing set is no longer on the property, it's vacant right now. So similarly to Kristen, when we're looking at something like a rezoning and a redesignation, we should also be looking at the statements of provincial interest. In this case, drinking water, the proposed development does not impact any drinking water that we know of. It's not in a flood risk area that's been identified by our mapping. It's not on agriculture land. It's supported or around infrastructure, so it could be connected to municipal services. And in terms of housing, this proposed rezoning and redesignation actually gives the opportunity for there to be housing where there wouldn't normally be on this property otherwise. So it is of staff's opinion that the proposed development is in keeping with the provincial statements of interest. So looking at this other portion of property, when we're looking at redesignating several of those properties, you can see right now that they're actually green, so they're open space designation along with the subject property. However, it was noticed at Planning Advisory Committee when this was presented that, as you can see on this map, those properties that were highlighted in teal before are actually orange, which is residential zones. So it's actually specifically R4 and I think that's R1 or R3. But the point is they belong under the residential designation. So something similar happened where there was a rezoning with that other criteria where you're allowed to rezone if you're abutting a redesignation. So this is pretty much a housekeeping amendment that we're looking to align the designation and the zone just to keep things neat. So yeah, to conclude, while there's no specific enabling policy to permit the proposed redesignation and rezoning for the subject property, it is in keeping with the spirit of the municipal planning strategy, and it helps enable the goals of the town. For the proposed amendments to redesignate the open space properties to residential, that's definitely in keeping with the municipal planning strategy. It's very in line with that. So we also have another proposed council motion, but that's in your agenda packages as well, and it'll come up later.
Thank you so much for your presentation. At this time, I would invite council if they have any questions or comments. We'll open up the floor for that. Okay. Hearing none, we will move to gallery presentations. I would ask if there are any opposing presentations at this time. either online or in person. For a second time, I will call for opposing presentations. And for a third and final time, I will call for opposing presentations. Okay, hearing none, I would call for any presentations in favor. Okay. For a second time, I will call for presentations in favor. For a third and final time, I will call for any presentations in favor. Okay, hearing none, I would ask of our CAO if we've received any written submissions.
There have been no written submissions received, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other items that we need to cover on our agenda this evening?
That concludes the public consultation.
Okay, very good. I would ask at this time for a motion of adjournment.
Moved.
Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor McIver, seconded by Councillor Coyne. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, we are adjourned.